happy to have you all here. Today we are going to have Joe as our speaker. He's going to be talking to us about the life after this one, and more specifically, how do we feel when we lose somebody that we love? We think we lost, right? They're never lost. They are here, and it's just the fact that we won't be able to see them, to hug them, or to talk to them. But we will always be able to. So before we start, I'm going to do a small reading by Joana de Angelis and Givaldo Pereira Franco. From time to time, accompany a coffin to deepen your reflections on the biological phenomenon of life and death. Observing how it occurs with others, you will wake up to what will inevitably happen to you. Eternity is of the spirit, while the experience of the body is transitory and brief. At this moment, you have the sensation that all is well and will last. But for how long? And what guarantee do you have concerning the length of time allotted to you? Thus, live well, but meanwhile, do not discard the possibility of your return, which is in fact the most certain of all events. And I just opened this by chance. Okay, so let's close our eyes and elevate our thoughts to God, our Creator, to Jesus, our Master of Love, our guiding light, and to all spirits present here today, the incarnate and discarnate ones. And let's open our minds for the new learnings that we are about to receive. May we keep them in our minds and in our hearts so we can make this experience in this lifetime the best that we can, and may we progress with it. We ask the good spirits today that give Jo the harmony that he needs to give us all these learnings. And so be it. Jo?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Everybody doing well? For those joining us online or watching this later, today is our first lecture of August. It's the lazy days of summer. We're still enjoying a little bit of heat before the fall and the seasons change on us. But it's all good. It's a beautiful day outside. I'm happy to have you folks here today. Thank you for coming. And today we're going to talk about something that most of us feel very sad about, right? Which is death. If you think about it, life and death, or the notion of this cycle, has been forever one of the main triggers or the main reasons humankind has been trying for answers through spirituality, through religion, through superstition. It intrigues us that we die. Even though everything around us dies, we're very much concerned about our own deaths. And out of this concern, or out of this, I would say, fear, a lot of the various societies evolved and created their own religion, their own faith, their own beliefs. And nobody knows for sure what happens. It still stays within the realm of beliefs. But here in our Spiritist Center, based on the Spiritist teaching, we believe we have a clear view of why this happens and what happens to us. Because let's be clear, there's no question about life. Life is what we're here. There's no question about death. Death is when life ends. The real question is, what happens after death? is there something after we die? And, in our own human nature, we always carried with us, regardless of which part of the world we have evolved from, we have all believed that there is more to us. Is there something after?
Sorry, I'm posting on Facebook.
Is more to us than just our body. We have a level of consciousness that makes it hard for us to believe that we're just a bunch of cells, electrical impulses, little memories stored inside that create this cognitive notion of intelligence. And that then all of this that we invest in, all of the years that we live, all of the experiences, all of the knowledge we obtain, that at any moment, because the only thing you need to die is to be alive. That's the only prerequisite. That at any point, that can just disappear from existence in the universe. Lost. We give ourselves, rightly or wrongly, a more sense of importance than that. And thus comes a lot of our beliefs around a creator. That if we're here, we have these special abilities, which is so much more than we can understand from any other living being. As far as we have found, we believe that there will be other planets and that could have intelligent life, but let's focus on us in terms of humanity on this planet Earth. We always have this certainty inside us that there's got to be more. Now, obviously, there are people who don't believe in any of this. They're completely atheists. They are materialists. They have the right to believe that what we experience here is that's it, and then that's gone. And where do we, as spiritists, start to build our belief? Our belief starts with the notion of a creator, one God, not a he, not a she, not a person, not a spirit, a God. There's no other words to describe what is God. God, we only understand God through what we have experienced coming from God, which is his creation. And we use the word his because we feel kind of strange calling it an it. But we say his or her creation, depending on the belief. So God has created us, and we have this inherent belief as well that God must be perfect. Because to create all of this, you have to be, capable of doing so much that the pettiness, the weaknesses, the mistakes that we do as humans can never compare to the perfection of what is God. And among these, even though we try to put a lot of human traits into God, we do believe that he created us to have some characteristics, some principles that must be important to him. Among them, the notion of fairness, of equality, that we're all created equal. All of our spirits, according to Spiritism, according to what the Spirit says, we're all created the same, simple and ignorant. We're like a seed, the seed of a spirit that's going to evolve and is going to get more intelligent, is going to get more evolved as each of the years go by, especially through this cycle of incarnation and discarnation. So that's our belief in Spiritism, that we start simple and we go through all of these. It's like going to school and having one year after the year after year, and every year you're getting smarter, you're getting better, you go to university, you do a PhD, you do whatever, you keep going. And this goes for a long, long time. And as we evolve, we never go back. We're getting better at each stage. So eventually, if we look at infinity, eternity, we will get to a level of very high purity. And we do this, as I said, through this continuous and endless cycle of being incarnated and then discarnated. So let's look at then of this transition. So the birth, we kind of understand because we experience it, we witness it, right? We witness from the conception to the actual growth of the baby to the birth of the baby. And we all agree it's still so mysterious and miraculous to us how all of this happens. How two little cells come together, and out of that union we get a human being. Death, not so simple, right? But from the perspective of the person who is dying, which is all of us eventually, we carry with us first the fear of the moment of death and the curiosity of what happens after death. And this is explained in many of the lectures that we had, all the topics. So I won't be going too much into this beyond the fact that we take it as a given that this happens all the time. And in fact, when we describe these transitions back and forth, we often say that our natural state of the spirit is the spiritual world, not the physical world. This is kind of an interim step. Where we want to reach and become and stay for longer and longer periods is in the spiritual world, where it gives us a lot more freedom and capabilities to the work that we need to do to help other spirits continue their evolution. So in that view, the other side is actually better than this side. Right? It's a place that we want to be, a place that we do want to return. And in fact, some people can argue or at least think that suicides, in part, are caused by the rejection of their goal in life, that they are frustrated, that they are not accomplishing what they came for, so they feel a failure and they want to end this life. But also that there is a natural attraction for us to go back to our natural place, which is the spiritual world. Right? And that's why one of the laws that we have is a law that it talks about that we have an instinct to go against that instinct of going back, that we want to survive, that we don't want to die. Right? So that has been put into us because otherwise everybody says, why am I here? This is the place where I suffer. Why should I stay alive in this planet? Why don't I just go back and enjoy the time in the spiritual world? Well, it's not that simple. But there is this idea that for the person who will be dying, there is the fear of the pain of the death, because we obviously don't like pain. And there is the fear of missing out of all of the things we enjoy in life. We get hooked into material things, right? And then there is, as I said, the unknown, what happens afterwards. But today's lecture is not about that person who is dying. It's about everybody else who stays behind. So, if that person has no friends, no relatives, nobody likes him or her, the lecture is done. Because there is no sorrow. No one will feel their loss. Which in some ways sounds sad. That someone has gone through this life and at the end of the life has nobody to cry for them, to miss them. But it does happen. We know that, right? And there are good souls. There are good souls that come and help at least give a sense that in the Middle East or in other cultures, there are women that actually, what they do is they go to funerals and cry, and they don't know who the person is. It doesn't matter to them. They go there to express sorrow for the loss of a human being they may have never met. I find that extraordinary and really fascinating that someone has that kind of ability to create this connection with the unknown. And we know that nobody's truly unknown to everyone. But they take it as their mission to provide their soul suffering left behind. So they can, the spirit that's moving on can have some understanding that they made a difference somehow. But how about then the more normal case? that you have a family, you have children, or maybe it's a young child who's dying that has parents or siblings and so forth. There's a lot of pain. And the pain of the death of a loved one can be among the most crucial and excruciating pains, emotional pains that we suffer. Because there comes a complete sense of loss, of lack of direction, like some kind of injustice had just happened. Because if you love that person, you believe they should never die, that they are good, and they should, live to be 99.9 years of age, or 100, whatever. That you have to have more time to prepare for their death. If it's a parent, we do have some time often, but then it seems it's never enough time. So why do we suffer? Don't we believe? Don't we have faith that they're going to a better place? If that's the case, and it is the case not only with Spiritism, but most of the other religions, heaven, the afterlife, is a blessed place. But people of their soul, in the other language, evolve into that state, and they're happy. They find some peace, right? May they rest in peace. Isn't that what a lot of the Catholic and Christian faiths say? Rest in peace. And Spiritism says, go work in peace, because we never rest. We start a different type of work. So why? Why do we suffer? Well, it's interesting. When we do these lectures, we go back to Kardec's book. That's always our basic reference, the 5 books. And today, 2 books talk specifically about this topic. One is the Spirits book on section number 4, part 4, the first chapter, that talks about the loss of loved ones. And it comes under the major title of Earthly Joys and Sorrows, which is interesting, right? And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 5, there's also a section that talks about the loss of loved ones, premature death. So in the Gospel, they're talking about this notion of premature death. It typically means children, right? Or very young adults who die. So we'll get there. So back to chapter 1, part 4, please. Do you study? It's important. If you haven't read the Spirits book 12 times, you haven't started understanding the Spirits book. And it talks about earthly joys and sorrows. And we had a lecture not long ago talking about being happy, right? What is the notion of being happy? And the very first question, I think it was mentioned in that lecture, is question 920. And it asks, can people enjoy complete happiness while on earth? And then they say no, because life has been given to them as either a trial or an expiation. It is up to them to mitigate their misfortunes and be happy as possible while on earth. So does everybody know the difference between a trial or expiation? Trial, expiation. So a trial is when you're given a test. It could be the very first time you're given the test, right? So you're experiencing a situation for the first time as your spirit. And so, for example, a spirit that has experienced social media for the first time, we can be assured that they never experienced this in previous lives, because social media is something so new. And their behavior in a social media environment could be a trial of how well they're going to do, right? So are they going to take this invisibility or anonymity that the social media gives us to be mean to others, to be bullying others? So by having us experience social media, it's a trial for all of us. And we're tested to see how well we're going to do. Are we able to maintain the same principles, at least that we seem to have when interacting person to person? Or is this kind of shadow that we can hide behind in the social media brings out the worst of us? That we were too shy, or too afraid, or too controlling not to show before, but it had never gone away. So it's shining a light, and what do we see? So that would be a trial. And we can have many things to be trialed about. So it could be a very first time that you are incarnated as a billionaire. There are no rewards in incarnation, by the way. We don't get rewarded. Either it's a trial for us to test how well we're going to do, or the other side is an expiation. Expiation is redemption. We're trying to redeem for our past errors. So if you've been always a very kind of selfish person, maybe your expiation is to come with nothing in this life. So you experience what does it mean to be really, really miserable and not have to know if you're going to have enough food to eat at the end of each day. Just an example, right? So the Spirit started that in this world, you don't come here to be happy. You come here to try a few things, be tested in terms of the lessons that you have learned, both for the two wings. We always have that beautiful expression that spirits have two wings, one of intelligence or knowledge, and the other one about morality, right? Because one without the other does not allow the spirit to fly up. So we could be doing those trials. Or we're going to be basically having to pay for prior mistakes. Not necessarily the same person. If you were rude or you killed a person, that's more than being rude. But if you killed a person in a previous life, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be interacting. You might be reincarnating with that same person again, in spirit, different persons. So the idea that we don't come here to be happy, we do not incarnate to be happy, does not mean we cannot be happy. We should be happy, because happiness creates a good sense with us that allows us to open our heart and our mind to new lessons, new learnings. If we're happy, it's a feedback, positive feedback that what we're doing is aligned with our reincarnatory or incarnatory plan. I always explain with you, when you're feeling really, really good at one point, and we all hopefully had gone through this. It doesn't happen every day, but there's one day that you really feel that everything is great. Everything is like the puzzle, all of the pieces have come in, it's perfect. What does that mean? Does it mean that you have reached perfection on earth? Not even close. To me, what it means is that we have achieved something that we plan to do in this life, even before we were born. In other lectures, we talked about this planning for incarnation. What do we want to do? How much of our life is going to be a trial? How much is going to be an expiation? And at one point, our spirit that knows the plan, even though us consciously incarnated may not be aware of it, our spirit says, I did it. It's working. And I'm kind of getting the good feedback. And that's why you feel that ultimate joy. It's almost like, it's, at least to me, it's happened a few times. It's hard to describe. But otherwise, we are looking at different reasons for us to somehow have sorrows or be hurt or be unhappy. A lot of our sorrow and unhappiness has to do with our selfishness. It's when we lose a job, now I can't pay for my car. Yeah, that could be a problem. It's not a good thing to have, but it's not an existential threat necessarily. But you're attached to that car, to that house, to that lifestyle, whatever, right? So you feel unhappy because something is being taken away from you. And we feel often very strongly about material things, even though it has been proven that when we acquire those things, our duration of our happiness is actually very short. It's almost like the real happiness comes from the expectation, the planning. We got it. Now that I've got it, I forget. I go to the next one. Right? It could be like a sexual conquest as well. Sometimes you see often that an individual wants to connect with another individual, and they work with it, and they try, and they finally connect with that person. And then when that's done, we throw them out and go to the next one. It seems to be a pattern that we repeat. But it goes back to we're incarnated here to move forward with our intelligence, our knowledge, and our morality. And often we're stuck with owning stuff, owning material things, material goals. And owning can also apply to loving, because there is an aspect of connection, of dependency in a love relationship, right? You love a child, you love a friend, you love a spouse, your parents, you connect with them. So you instinctively believe that now you're entitled to continue experiencing that connection, that ownership, even though it was never yours. So when death comes, and as far as we're looking here from our incarnated perspective, it is definite, it is final. We will never see that person again. And that is true. We will never see that person. We might see the spirit again, but that person that we know with that spirit will no longer exist. In different lives, they will be different persons. Incarnated, same spirit. So this is very tragic to us. We suffer. We think, goes back to our selfishness, we think more about our loss. What have we lost? We say, I've lost a child. Givaldo Franco tells the story that this woman came to him and says, Givaldo, help me. I lost my son. And he says, okay, let's look for him. Where is he? Where did you lose him? Was it at home? Was it, we can look, no. He died. Well, he says, well, he's not lost. We know exactly where he is. You don't have access to him. But you haven't lost anything because he was never yours. But in our stage of evolution, this is very hard to accept. In some cases, the loss could have material impact. If the person is a spouse who's the breadwinner, and now they're no longer alive, the survivor, the wife, the children could have new sufferings because of the lack of income, right? If the survivor are small children and they lose their parent, or the parents die, I don't want to say lose it because we're so accustomed to using it, the parents discarnate at the same time in a car accident, then they have to go live with somebody else. They no longer have their parents with them. So there is an impact. But whatever the impact is for a spouse, or a son, a child, a friend, that suffering is part of your suffering that you expected to deal with. It doesn't mean that you have to feel nothing, that you can't be sad about it. Of course you can be sad. We're humans in this stage. We love being with the people we are. So obviously we're going to be devastated depending on that level of relationship. We'll be sad. But realize, first of all, that this is, you own that feeling, right? Not the spirit who has just died or discarnated. They are doing well. They're following their path, right? They will be taken care of. We have to believe that. That is our belief. That is our faith. That death is not final for the spirit. And people say, oh my God, he was so young. He was 22, had his whole life ahead of him. Yeah, this life ahead of him. Think about the 1,000 other lives he's going to have in the future. They're not impacted. And maybe he was always supposed to die at that age. When I say could be, it's because we know that when we incarnate, we have an expectation of, there is this sense of a expiry date for us. that God and maybe many of the higher spirits may know. But this can be interrupted by the free will of another spirit, right? So if another spirit comes and kills you, and they were not supposed to do that, their free will has changed your program, your planning. It doesn't mean that it can't be fixed in the next life. So we often want to say that I feel sorry for the person who just passed away. Well, in fact, we're feeling sorry for ourselves. In some cases, we see scenarios of people who have been suffering a long disease for many months, sometimes years. And then when they pass away, the family is actually relieved that they are no longer suffering. Isn't that the case? Yeah? Well, put that into the context that all of us here are sufferers. By definition, we're in this planet to suffer, either through trials or expiations. So isn't the same true? Finally, they're not suffering on this earth anymore. They're back to the spiritual world. Now, we're so accustomed to our life that in most cases, our suffering, we accept them, which is a good thing. But we don't think that way, that we need to terminate our lives because we're suffering too much. In most cases, the good side of being in a material world, the pleasures we get out of it, the temptations we get out of, the relationships, the connections we do with other spirits are much better than any of the trials we're having. And we do always still have the faith that if we're suffering, if we're going through this at any phase, it's because we were meant to. This is what often we try to comfort those who have lost, right? That unfortunately you had a plan for your life. Let's say you lost a child. There's no reason, I mean, we know that child's not coming back. But be assured that child, first of all, was an old spirit. It's not the first time they've incarnated. They've gone through this many times. And they are now back to the spiritual world where they can continue their path. And we may or may not come back in other lives to be together again. That the moment of death is a moment of assistance by the spiritual workers, right? To help, just like you have a nurse helping you or a doctor helping you in the birth, there are spirits helping us on that discarnation. So the first step to comfort is to accept truly and deeply that the spirit that has just come to the next phase, gone back, is being taken care of. They did not disappear. They did not lose anything. They are following the path that they were meant to go. And we also, we cannot understand God's will, but we have to not only accept it, but feel it's a blessing. That spirit has accomplished something that they were supposed to accomplish, and they move on. Part of their mission, so Sandra and I, we lost our first child. Very few days premature, was alive for one day, and then he went back, right? Terrible sadness when we're that young and suffering. Anybody who has lost a child can relate. But the key thing is that experience changed us, made us more mature than we were before, made us come together. 42 years later, we're still together. So there's always a purpose for these events. Nothing is a complete disaster or disastrous, right? Now, so like I said, we know that our baby was taken care, and he's probably incarnated now in a different life and taking care of what he needs to do, or she now, depending on how they have incarnated. And we moved on. The pain is recorded in our soul. The pain is part of our lesson, part of those experiences that make living wonderful, even when it's painful. Every person will deal with grief differently, right? And it's difficult, it's impossible to have a single message, a single way of dealing with them, right? Because as I said, the impact of that death could have many implications. So if, let's say, the mom cannot have more children, or it's an age they can't, so here is the whole dream of a life, of being a mother, gone. Does this mean that that person no longer has a purpose? We have to believe that God has a different purpose, different intention for the life of that person, and they have to find it now. Is it hard? Yeah, very hard, difficult. They may not be able to accomplish it, but nothing great is accomplished without effort. Great things are achieved with great effort. People who love their exercise say no pain, no gain, right? I don't want to say that, I don't want to imply that all of our lessons have to be painful. But this particular case, and it will happen to all of us at some point in time, unless you're living alone and you have no friends, no relatives, no parents, no children, whatever, no brothers and sisters, unless you're going to be the one going first, everyone will experience this. And it will impact us differently. But first and foremost, rest assured that the spirit is not the problem, the discarnated spirit. That loved person, if you really love that person, you know, he's good, right? He's just following what was meant to be. Now we have to absorb the event, absorb the emotions, and now realize, okay, what is the lesson now? It's not my fault, right? But there's still a lesson. A lesson is for me, right? Especially children who come in and die very, very young, within the first days or first years. This is not a lesson for that spirit. That spirit graciously has volunteered to be living such a short life, has invested the whole process to be reincarnated, knowing that they will live for a very short time. Their mission is not about their lives. Their mission is how they will impact other people's lives. So they came and went in our benefit. Somehow, we don't know what it is, right? Maybe looking back 42 years, we can understand and believe that that was the purpose. But the Spirit knows. That Spirit is aware. And we can only thank them for being in our lives for one day, 1 year, 10 years, maybe a brother or sister who died when they were 20. If we start thinking this way, start believing in what we say and what we read and what Spiritism teaches, if we start really, really believing in it, it won't make the pain not come, but it provides us a bit of a path, our own path. And if we can have other Spiritists, other people who understand this, help us through that process, it provides us a little handbook of how to do it. But it doesn't mean that it will be done in a week, a month, a year. Each one has their own time. But like I said, what really helps is to think that this is not about the spirit. I never owned that spirit. They have their own path. It's about me. It's about my feelings, my dependency, the time that I had, and what does it mean? And how do I accept the lost vision or dream that I had with that person, because essentially that's what it is, right? You love somebody, you have a dream, you have a vision of what your experience, your relationship with that person is going to be for many, many years. Often you have a child, you can see them graduating, you can see them getting married, you can see them getting grandchildren, and so forth, right? You create that vision, that dream, and somebody then says, oops, dream gone, create a new one. How do you recover from that? So it's really comes back to me. So in the gospel, in that chapter 5, in I don't know 21, it says, when death comes to reap a harvest in your family, indiscriminately taking the youngest before the oldest, you often say, God is not just, since he sacrifices the one who is strong, has a great future, while preserving those who have already lived many years full of disappointment, taking those who are useful and leaving behind those who are no longer are, and breaking a mother's heart by depriving her of innocent creatures that was her whole joy. So this is exactly what we've been saying, right? So first of all, we have an expectation that who is born first will die first, right? That the oldest will die. And that God could have made a choice. Rather than taking the grandchild, why don't take the grandfather? Right? He's old, he's lived his life, he's happy, he's realized a lot. So why not, if God is looking for death, a soul to come back, why not get the oldest one? Well, first of all, God doesn't want death. He's not looking for counts, body counts of, I can pick you, who I'm going to roll a dice and figure out who's going to die. That's not how it works. Each one of us has a plan. God has a plan for us. How many times do we say this? God has a plan for us. And when we say God, it's God and everybody who assists, all of the elevated spirits that help us in this journey, because we're never alone. So it's not like changing apples for bananas. It doesn't work. That spirit, the youngest person, that's what they needed. This is the time has come for them to go back. If I took that away from them and gave the death to somebody else, I'm punishing that spirit, wouldn't I? Because they've done what they were supposed to do. They were here for the right time. They want to go back and plan for their next life. And then someone said, no. You're going to have to stay working overtime because the other person now, I've decided that he's older, so he's going to be the one that has to go back. How do we know that oldest person is yet to achieve something important in their lives that was planned for them to do? Is it fair to make that choice? Is God makes choices this way? It's not how it works. But we feel angry, right? With our grief, we feel pain, we feel loss. But the very first steps, right, is the anger. And who do we blame? Well, if it's a disease, we blame God. Sometimes we blame the doctors for not saving the person. If it was an accident or violence, we blame the other person, the person responsible for it. If we're responsible, oh my God, that's the worst scenario ever. If you're responsible for the death of a child, often you will want to kill yourself as a punishment. But at the end, God is not making choices in numbers. God does not need people to die to go back to do whatever. Right? God is helping us. Think this way. God wants our progress. God wants us to find that eternal peace. Nothing that is in our natural process, and death is a natural process, exists to somehow slow that down or prevent you from achieving those goals. Everything is meant to help us, even when we don't know how or why. And they also say that, so here's something interesting that Kardec says. Premature death, and the word premature death is anything that the people who survive the person thinks is premature. I can think that somebody who dies today at 61 is premature because I'm 62. So I think 61 is premature. Whereas other people would say, no, that's okay. It's already done. So premature death is frequently a great blessing that God grants to those who depart. That's what we're saying. Thus preserving them from the miseries of life or the seductions that could have led them to their loss. Those who die in the flowery youth are not victims of fatalism. Rather, God deemed it useful for them not to remain on earth any longer, not in this life. You've accomplished your work, and maybe you can say these spirits were really good because they did it very quickly. And maybe their mission was supposed to be very short. Anybody who has worked in the military knows that there's big plans for big exercises or big missions, complex missions, and then there are very small missions that can be done in 1 hour, 2 hours. Each one is as important as the other. A mission could be for several weeks, can be for a day. It doesn't mean that they're less important. So the mission of that spirit who comes and goes very quickly is equally as important. And we, again, the word here is blessed. We're not being blessed. That spirit is blessed. We're still being put to our trials, those who remain, because we have to learn. And if we already knew everything, if we had that knowledge and strengthening our belief, you would not suffer. Seems logical, right? Because if we know that the spirit is doing everything it's supposed to do, that God is helping, is blessing the child that we just lost, it was a big reward for that spirit, we'll be happy. So happy for our child to have been taken back to the spiritual world. But we don't. We don't have that strength and belief, which is okay. We are where we are. But for those who may be experiencing, because I don't know, that maybe some people listening, and we had friends here who lost parents recently, right? COVID brought a lot of deaths, millions of deaths to this world that went all premature in some ways, right? And we've been tested quite a bit with this notion of loss. So if there is a moral to the story, is keep the faith. Understand that that spirit was meant to be discarnated, that they're not losing, they're not suffering anymore, they are not being punished. We're not being punished as well, but we are being asked to take on this trial, right? And as every trial, we will be measured by how we accept it or don't accept it. If you're a person who will become forever bitter, angry, depressed, basically stop living because of the loss of a loved one, and it happens many, many times, then you're not passing that test. Because what's the purpose of you to be immersed forever in your life, for the rest of your life, in those negative feelings? Be a believer. If it's meant to be, you will be together with that spirit again. And this is what you need to move forward. I hope this has been interesting. I guess we're open for some Q&As. Any questions?
Yes, so I don't know if there's anybody that's coming for the first time.
I don't know if you can see the image now. Is
Yeah.
she on? No?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we open for questions or even comments. Does anybody wants to?
Was it helpful? Was it interesting? Was it?
Any questions from the internet? No,
No.
nothing? Okay. So yeah, it's very hard when you lose somebody. So, there is the time I remember when I lost my mother. It was already 2007. I was a spiritist for the longest time. And I could not get over her death. And I knew all the knowledge, everything I knew. But my the knowledge was all here. So those are the lessons when the knowledge gets to the heart and we have to live it. And I remember that I talked to my family doctor here in Canada, and I asked him, I'm worried because um, it's been already 2 months that my mom passed away, and I'm depressed. I can't get over that. How long does it take? He said, it's going to take as long as it needed to be taken. Yeah, some people get over in a month. Some people get over in a few months. Some people get over after years, and some people never get over. So it's a very unique way of dealing with your own, as Joe said, with your own issues that you have to go through. And I knew my mom. I didn't lose my mom. My mom didn't die. I know she's a spirit. She's in a place that she needs to be now, and I should be happy for her. But I wasn't. I was in pain. And the funny thing is that when my father passed away, he this is how I became a spirit, because I couldn't believe death is forever. Like, what does that mean? So it's something that I know most spiritists, they become spirits because they can't understand death. It's something that is too final, and it's something that doesn't make any sense. How can I love somebody and then that person just goes? Where does that person goes? And I believe that spiritism brings us all these answers that make sense, that puts our heart in a place that is console, like you get that consolation that they are not alone. They are in place that they continue learning. And I'm grateful for everything that I get from that person. And that's how I believe that I dealt with my own feelings of loss of loved ones. And for every and each one of you, it's going to be your own way. So don't despair. You're not alone. We are all together in this boat. And it will be the day that he said that his grandmother that is going to go first, because I told him already, I'm going to go before you. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today. Jo is now going to do our final prayer. And for those who want to receive the pass, you can stay sitting, and we'll be doing this after. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. So, as we keep our thoughts elevated to good thoughts, to good feelings, let's pray to God, our Creator, who is the wisest, who knows the purpose, our path, our journey, who is eternally and infinitely merciful, who helps us every day in our evolution, in our journeys, in whatever lives we may have. We thank Him for being there with us, for giving this blessed experience of life and existence. We also send our thoughts, our prayers to anyone who might be suffering at this moment the loss of a loved one, who may be feeling the pain, distraught, lost. We send prayers of faith that this is what needed to happen, that our loved ones are well, and that we will be well too, if we just give it a chance and accept the events that are given to us. We pray for all of those who are ill, who are afraid of their own deaths. We send them our thoughts of reassurance, of the love and protection they've all received from the good spirits. We send hope and love to all of those listening to us or here present, that you may have a wonderful week. And we hope to see you again next Sunday. And so be it. Thank you for those connected online. We'll disconnect now. Thank you.